Hey there, you curious cats. In today's video, we're going to be talking about mobile game development in Unreal Engine. Because you're probably curious, is it possible? Yes, it is. But, before we get to that, we should probably take a step back. I am making a game for mobile devices. But, why am I using Unreal Engine? Because there's a lot of stuff, especially on the internet, across the place, that kind of just says, hey, don't do that. Bad idea. And obviously, there is probably some merit to what some people were saying. But to tell you the truth, I straight up just decided I'm going to use Unreal Engine for this mobile game. Just to see whether it would work. I wanted to learn Unreal Engine with mobile game development, see what the workflow was like, and focus on doing lower scope games like I've done for this one, right? I'm using Unreal Engine because I wanted to see whether it was possible, whether it was feasible, whether it was a good workflow, whether it did what I was looking for in a reasonable amount and wasn't just like, I don't know, chugging the device like I assume people kept assuming. So, I decided to use Unreal Engine just to see whether it was a feasible tool to use for mobile game development. And as part of that, I needed to get some hardware to actually test on. So I went out and I bought some phones. Multiple. Yes, I bought multiple phones. I bought 2 Android phones because I am aware that when it comes to game development, especially considering that I have a Windows PC, that Android game development was going to be simpler for me, right? So I went out and I bought some phones. And I thought to myself, if I really want to test what Unreal Engine was capable of, like where it functioned, where it lied, I was just like, I will go and I will buy the lowest spec device that Unreal Engine recommends. So I got myself a Samsung Galaxy A05s phone, Android phone, as my testing device. I bought 2 of them. And I started to create my little casual mobile sorting game. Now, the first question that comes to mind is, when you do a mobile game with Unreal Engine, how does it run? Is it a big old chug machine that doesn't really run? Is there like some inherent things that you need to consider? Is it just not going to function? Here's the thing, right? So, yes, there are specific settings in Unreal Engine that you will have to mess with to make sure that it functions at a reasonable frame rate that players with those kind of phones could actually utilize. But overall, considering this is supposed to be the lowest spec phone that they support, it does pretty well, right? Like out of the box, like if you just, I don't know, build an empty level and then put it on the phone, it functions. Which, you know, that's a good sign, you know. I mean, look, the thing is that people make it kind of sound like just out of the box, like Unreal Engine won't work, right? But there's a caveat to that, and it's very specific in the fact that if you try to do anything with it, they assume that it wouldn't work, right? And that's not necessarily true. But there are some things that you need to do, some settings that you need to mess with. And some of these settings can be a little bit all over the place, right? And to figure out where your problems actually are, you have to get a bit familiar with Unreal Insights. It is the profiler that comes with Unreal Engine that you can actually attach to an Android device and then send the data back up to the computer so that you can actually view it in the profiler. Right? Some of those things will make you see some of the immediate problems that come with the game and the inherent settings that are turned on, such as I had to turn off mobile HDR because it ended up showing up in the profiler and it was quite expensive, or it I turned it off and then noticed that there was significantly reduced resources, which, you know, HDR, cool, it would be nice to have, but you can work without it. And it was in the VR section. I don't know why. Like, it actually affects the mobile game, but it's in the VR section of the settings. I don't know, maybe. And I don't know. It says mobile HDR, so it does say mobile, but like, you know, I would like it in like both or something like that. I don't know. It's a little bit weird to find it over there, but it does actually affect mobile games, and so I had to turn that off and got myself a little bit more performance and such, right? When I initially started developing this, I don't create the art myself. I go to Fab to find asset packs and go through my libraries and stuff like that. When I initially started, I had some sets of art assets from somebody, and I was trying to create like a nature forest feel for one of my levels, right? Because my game environment is generally just that. It's just an environment. You don't really navigate through it. So it's just about looking pretty. But I was putting some trees around the place, and trees from this asset pack, and I was noticing some significant performance problems. And I thought to myself, oh dear, what is going on? Like, I was dropping down to 26 frames per second, and I was barely doing anything. I would just put like a couple trees around the place, and it's just like, no, don't want to run very well. Sorry. And I did some investigating to try and figure out what was going on. Like, hey, you know, I feel like all I'm doing is putting these trees here. I was checking blank levels with the trees and stuff like that. And what I think was the problem, and I could be wrong about this, because of course there are an infinite number of things that can happen in a video game to cause things to occur. I just know it wasn't happening in an empty level, but what I think was occurring was what's known as overdraw. So each of these leaves were masked materials, or maybe groups of trees, I can't remember exactly, but the point is that they were masked materials, which from my research means that what happens with the renderer is that when it goes to render an object, or goes to render that material, it tries to render it, and then if there's like a part of transparency, then it needs to go and be like, alright, well then I have to look behind it and then try and draw that, and then if they're transparent, then I have to look behind that and try and render that. And so it does something known as, I believe it's called overdraw. And I think it's because of that my trees that I had originally were way too expensive, because they use masked materials. The overdraw caused it to be really, really expensive. And that was not good. It was dropping my frames quite significantly. And so debugging that was a bit of a process of A/B testing and using Unreal Insights and such like that, and actually just like testing on the phone. So the process of connecting Unreal Insights to the Android device and such like that. And I was able to figure out that it had to do with the trees, and I assume it had to do with overdraw, because it did originally have a wind effect, but I think I was able to turn off the wind effect, and so like well-positioned offset stuff, and it still didn't change all that much. So there are some considerations that you have to make like that, right? Now, when it comes to actually the mobile game's functionality, now that is an interesting separate case. I work primarily in C++, which is, I think, extremely beneficial, because when the functionality is inside of C++, it means that there is actually official support from Unreal Engine that allows you to attach a IDE like Visual Studio. I don't know if it allows other IDEs, but Visual Studio It can attach to the process that is currently running on the Android device and allows you to have like breakpoints and see what the code is doing, and when you hit those breakpoints, like what the stack is doing and things like that, or the call stack, sorry. And that is one methodology that can be used for debugging, but when it actually comes down to it, I found that the primary methodology that I ended up using for a lot of figuring out what was going on Android devices, I think ended up just being a lot of like print strings and stuff like that, things that you could have display and like UI and stuff like that. Generally speaking, like it tried to be as similar on both PC and mobile as possible. They didn't seem to generally have too many conflicting things, but when they did, it was like a process of, you know, looking at the relative system that might be causing the problem, and then, you know, just testing really, and seeing, like, you know, with print strings and that kind of stuff, and maybe you attach to Visual Studio and those kind of things. So it is possible, but it's not going to be, obviously, like, because it's another platform, so it's not going to be as streamlined as just testing on the PC. Now, an important consideration to make, and this is one that I ended up making at the start of development, was the type of mobile game you'll end up creating. And the game I ended up choosing was something that I thought would be a safe bet, and ensuring that Unreal Engine would function as I'd hope for the game, just to see on a very basic level, very basic kind of style, that it could do what I wanted it to do. So essentially, it's a casual mobile sorting game. You get like these boxes, and these boxes have puzzles in them. You basically just sort them. There's no real movement, there's no AI, nothing like that. So very, very basic, very, very simple. And the hurdles that come with this, I wanted to make environments still to see what they would be like on a mobile device, and there are challenges with them. Like I said earlier, the trees with their overdraw, I believe it was, it ended up being quite expensive, and it's interesting because it wasn't even a world that you end up navigating. So it's kind of crucial. The kind of art that you choose is super duper important, and the approaches that you use to create the art is super duper important, because not everything that works on PC is necessarily going to work on mobile. It can be quite expensive as well. So, but you know, Epic Games, they are trying to make more like optimizations and make it more functional on mobile devices, especially with like their current trajectory on how they want to be sharing and releasing Fortnite and such. So, you know, there are improvements constantly happening, but I thought it would be a smart idea to start with something simple, easy, that I'd assume that the gameplay wouldn't rely on expensive components to it. And so I've been able to make something that's reasonably functional and good. So that has worked out for me. Now, some interesting things from just that, you know, I have 3D widgets as the UI for the game. So the bags, they have 3D widgets containing all the items and the grid that contains all the items and such like that. And there was a point in time where I had because I had these little animations that would play as you drag the items, I had every single one ticking, and I think they would probably like vary to like, you know, there were 20 of these widgets, item widgets for each bag, and if you had 2 bags open at the same time, then there'd be like 40. Good math. Yep. You'd have 40 widgets ticking at once, and it caused significant performance problems on mobile devices. So the amount of ticking components and like the necessity of it, because I literally, what I'd done is I'd turn the tick on for each and every one, just so that the animation could work when they get interacted with, but they don't animate until they're interacted with. So to fix that, I just turn on the tick when they want to start animating. So that was pretty simple to do But it is something to consider. Even in something like simple like this, it taught me about that ticking can be quite expensive and you need to be very cautious on where you're actually putting your ticks. While the game isn't done, I did try to use the Google Play Store for some systems. I originally had some plans for some online multiplayer functionality in the game, but I think I'm gonna have to leave that out for now because designing the levels for that stuff is gonna be problematic. But I did try to use Google Play for some of like the online subsystem stuff, and my interaction with Google Play was a bit frustrating in that sense, but I don't know whether that was the Epic Games side or the Google Play side. There are a lot of systems that I had to set up to try and get it to work that was just like, it was just a whole lot. There's a lot of agreements, policy stuff that you have to set up, send over, make it so it's like attached and things like that with Google Play as well. So it is a bit of a process to kind of interact with. So there's a lot of time that has to be given just for that part alone. Finally, I want to talk about getting help with making mobile games. What kind of resources are there? And everything that I've been able to do, largely, especially like debugging and connecting between like the PC and the phone and stuff like that, has been thanks to people providing resources on how to do specific things. But there's even less resources for that kind of stuff for mobile games specifically on Unreal Engine. So it is one of those things that it's a little bit difficult, and there is going to be a part of it that you're going to have to do some exploration for yourself. And that can be a little bit difficult, but the resources do exist. You can get through the pipeline, at least for my type of game. I've been able to get through the pipeline, debugging, getting it to a position of like release and all that kind of stuff. It's all there, it all exists. So it is functional. It is possible to get it functional. So, would I say that mobile game development with Unreal Engine is possible? Or, better yet, good? It is definitely possible. I'm not going to make a commentary on whether it's good, because not because, it's bad, but I don't want to seem like I've got a strong opinion. But what I do want to say is that I feel that the scope of my game and what I've created was, and on purpose, is a little bit smaller, a little bit like more minimal than maybe some of the other types of games people would try to create with Unreal Engine. I think it's important to note that there are games out there made with Unreal Engine, such as Star Wars Hunters was a mobile game that was made with Unreal Engine, and that I think has a bit more going on than my game does, obviously. And they were able to get it working. I don't know what their lowest spec support device was, but they were able to get that functioning. And so I think it's definitely possible. There's a lot of considerations that you've got to make. And I don't know whether those considerations are Unreal specific, because I haven't done mobile game development with other platforms. But I think so far the process for me has been pretty good. I think it works well, and they've got tools to help you figure out where your problem areas are, and it's just about learning what those, how to use those tools and how to identify those problem areas using those tools. So that is my conclusion. At this point, I'm just gonna say, if you liked that, if you liked everything that I just said, or you want to hear some more of my grand old wisdom, you should subscribe, and just, I guess, have a good day,